Join me as we prepare this delicious vegan holiday meal. Sit back, relax, and don't fall asleep. Let's start off with our desserts. The butter, we're using avocado oil 8 ounce. Remember, we're making for 2 pies, so individually it will be 4 ounce. So we're going to pour into a container to put it in the freezer for an hour, and we will check it in between. At 25 minutes in the freezer, this is the texture. We want it thicker than this. It's almost there. Let's keep it in the freezer for a little while. This is the full hour it has been in the refrigerator, and this texture is perfect. We want to keep it this way even if we have to keep taking it in and out of the freezer. For our apple pie filling, you will need 15 or 20 ounces of apples or 5 small apples. You can choose whether you want your apples in chunks or if you prefer to cut them how I am slicing them. Using a grater, we will be adding some grated ginger to our filling. I didn't know what I was thinking, but listen, that gave the apple pie a perfect, wonderful flavor. Adding 5 ounces of water. When it comes to boil, we will add our apples. Mix a little and then add 1 tablespoon of grated ginger, and 6 tablespoons of agave sweetener. Mix together and let simmer for 10 minutes. When it is finished, if no water is in it, very good, but we still need to strain just to make sure. I actually drank that juice, it was really good. After it's strained, we're going to set aside so we can prepare our squash filling. Food prep tip of the day. So rather than letting your squash get old in the refrigerator, this was a piece I literally had for 2 weeks, but I put it in a bowl just like that with some water and it actually did not rotten. And this was enough for my squash pie, so we're just cutting them up into chunks. Adding 1 cup of water and 0.960 pounds of squash. When it comes to boil, we're going to add the squash to the pot. Please add 1 tablespoon of grated ginger and 2 cloves immediately. I thought about it after, but I forgot to mention. So we're going to let it boil for 10 minutes on medium heat. Once the fork goes through, it's ready to puree. Please remove the cloves before pureeing. It was only to add flavor. So we're going to add 2 ounces of coconut milk and 5 tablespoons of agave sweetener. Blend until smooth. If you have a hand immersion blender, you can blend from the pot instead of using a food processor. Nice and smooth, let's make our dough crust. For our crust, add in 0.680 pounds of spelt flour, 2 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. Mix together. Remember, we're making 2 pies, so if you're making 1, then just divide the recipe into 2. Using our frozen avocado oil butter, add to bowl immediately along with 12 tablespoons of cold water. Using our pastry blender, blend in all ingredients as we're expecting a crumbly dough. I didn't skip this part so you can thoroughly see how to make it. This recipe requires skill. If you feel stuck, just use a metal spoon to help combine. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. As we can see, it's coming together. Once all the flour is combined in the dough, you can use a spoon to scrape the sides. And as we can see here, it's not hard at all. Before we massage our crust, let's oil our pan to have them ready. Adding a half tablespoon per pan. Using a pastry brush to evenly spread. Let's get back to kneading. Just add a little flour, not much, onto the surface. And then we're going to pour all that crumbly dough on the surface, and then we're going to pick up all the pieces to combine together. Of course, it needed a little bit of extra care, some patting and forming rather than more kneading. So all I'm doing, as you can see, is massaging the dough, preventing breakage at the same time. Cut into 4 even pieces. Whilst we form and roll out one, let us put the other 3 in the freezer just to keep it cool. Now it didn't melt or anything, but that's what I decided to do since the dough deserves special care. I was a bit afraid thinking the dough would have fallen apart, but it actually could have used a rolling pin, so this way still worked, but I prefer to use the rolling pin. Remember, this is my first time making this recipe, so I was curious, even though it came out really good. Using our cooled pie filling, we're going to add the apple to the pie pan. Use a spoon to flatten and smooth it out. This is how I want you to do it, using a rolling pin. The spatula helps the dough from the surface, so don't peel it up with your hands. Then use a fork to create art and to seal the pie crust. This reminds me of clay dough. If it breaks apart, don't panic. Simply form it together. We're adding 4 holes in the middle to allow extra heat to flow through and for heat to escape. Next, we are repeating the same process for our squash pie. Even though the squash pie came out really good, I decided here to roll out the top crust first before I pour the squash in. When I made the squash filling, I was like, this filling is so thin and watery-ish. But when I baked it and let it cool, it was very good. So we have both crusts ready. Let's pour our butternut squash filling in. Then we're going to use a fork to create art and to seal the pie crust. I didn't put any holes in the center, as you can see, because not much heat needs to escape. The butternut squash is already a softish, filling. We will bake both pies for 30 minutes on 365 degrees. Ten more minutes remaining, looking good so far. I didn't add an extra cooling rack, so I used a cloth to prevent putting on the countertop as is. They're out of the oven and they are still bubbling. Look at that. Everything is perfect, guys. Wait until you try it. So the bread will need an hour to rise, so we're just starting off with 0 to 800 pounds of spelt flour and 1.5 tablespoons of yeast. We want to mix together, adding in 2 ounces of olive oil and 1 ounce agave syrup. Using 5 ounce water, we want the temperature to be 100 degrees so that by the time it mixes with the other liquids, it will be warm. I'm only going based off the temperature of my liquids and the environment, so just make sure that the liquid is warm before you pour it in the flour. Let's add the liquids and dry ingredients together. Mix until everything is combined. Next, sprinkle some flour onto the surface to knead the dough into a circle so we can let rise for an hour. I used the same bowl and I covered it with foil. Feel free to use a cloth or a plastic wrap and put it somewhere warm to rise for 1 hour. This is how it looks after the hour, so before we knead. Secondly, we will lightly oil our pans and preheat our oven to 360 degrees. Adding some flour, it's time to knead now so we can separate the dough into rolls. I like my bread to be the same size, especially my bread rolls, so all I'm doing here is dividing the dough and kneading for them to rise. Making sure all of the rolls are 0 to 150 pounds. I let the bread rise for 15 minutes, so now I'm going to let them bake for 30 minutes on 365 degrees. This is how it looks after 30 minutes baking. If you want your bread darker than this, simply keep it in longer. To add extra softness, lightly brush the bread with some olive oil. We want to prepare anything that will take long, starting off with the brown and wild rice. Adding 8 cups of water and 0 to 450 pounds of rice. Let boil for 30 minutes on medium heat. It's ready now, so let's strain. Ensure all water is properly drained, then we want to set aside. For our quinoa, using 32 ounces of water and 0 to 300 pounds of white quinoa. We're going to let boil on medium heat for 10 minutes. We see it's coming together, so let us get ready to strain. Strain all water from quinoa, rest aside until it's time to cook the quinoa. As one of our sweet side dishes, we're going to cut some peaches up. You can slice them however you wish. Every individual recipe will be posted separately, including the sweet peaches. The links will be in the description. Add in 4 ounces of water, 5 ounces of prep peach, 3 tablespoons of agave sweetener, 4 cloves. Let simmer on low heat for 20 minutes and then set them aside. We will also be having some corn, so for me I'm only boiling it plain, so you can do it however you like. I was watching how much sweets I would consume in this meal. For our candied yams, we're just peeling our sweet potato first, removing any bad parts before we get ready to cook them. You can also cut them up how you like, but I'm slicing them. So we're going to add 2.5 cups of water, 11.85 ounces sweet potato, 1 teaspoon of allspice, a half teaspoon of clove, and 3 tablespoons of agave sweetener, a pinch of ginger, and a pinch of Himalayan sea salt. Using avocado oil, adding in 1 teaspoon, 1 tablespoon of chopped onion and bell peppers, 1 teaspoon of fresh thyme. Mix together, then add 4 ounces of water. Then we're going to add in 3 ounces of prep chickpeas, a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, dry basil, 2 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder. Mix together and let simmer for 10 minutes, then set aside. For the brown and wild rice recipe, we're going to add in 1 teaspoon of avocado oil, 2 ounce onions and bell peppers and celery, 2 1/4 teaspoon of minced garlic, and a 1/4 teaspoon of fresh thyme. Stir together, and then we're going to add in 5 ounces of our prepped brown rice. Next, adding in 2 teaspoons of virgin coconut oil, a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, and dry basil. We're going to mix together and let simmer for a minute and then rest aside. For our veggies, we're going to add in a teaspoon of avocado oil, 2 ounces of squash and zucchini, as well as oyster mushrooms, 0.70 ounces of onions and bell peppers. Then we're going to add in a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt and basil, 2 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, and 3 teaspoons of water. We're going to mix together. The water and steam should prevent sticking. Using arugula, we're going to add in 0.75 ounce. You can let simmer for a minute, or once the squash is to your liking, set aside. Add in 1 teaspoon of avocado oil, 1 ounce onions and bell peppers, 1.65 ounce of broccoli, 1.55 ounce of squash, 1 teaspoon of garlic, 2 1/4 teaspoon of fresh thyme. We're going to mix together and let simmer for a minute. Next, add in 1 ounce of oyster mushrooms. Mix together and let simmer. Add in 8 ounces of prep quinoa, 2 1/4 teaspoon of basil and sea salt, 3 teaspoons of virgin coconut oil. Mix thoroughly and let simmer and set aside so we can prepare our oyster mushrooms. Using avocado oil for our oyster mushrooms, for the batter we're going to add in 0.190 pounds of spelt flour, 2 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, dry basil, and a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. Mix together. Next we will add in 4 ounces of water, adding little by little. I forgot to mention a 1/4 teaspoon of thyme and oregano. Next, you want to dip your oyster mushrooms in the wet batter and then into the dry batter. And then fry it afterwards, ensuring the oil is 350 degrees or less. It all depends on how hot your oil is, so I didn't really time these ones, so I just monitored both sides. As they brown, I flipped on both sides and strained it after. So for our salad, we're doing something very simple. We're gonna put some romaine lettuce, plum tomatoes, cucumbers, purple onion, and hemp seeds. For our dressing, we're keeping it simple. 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 1 tablespoon of water, and key lime juice, as well as a half of a quarter teaspoon of sea salt. So not the full quarter teaspoon of sea salt, and 2 teaspoons of agave. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. We appreciate you. See you in my next video.